everyone, and welcome to another episode of our award-winning podcast, Smart People Travel Wise, a platform where we discuss all things about travel. I'm your host, Tennie Sumague, come to you from my hometown of Woodside, Queens, New York City. And today we are going to discuss about one of my favorite cities in the world, Rio de Janeiro. And I'm going to introduce to you my guest who is the U.S. representative for Visit Rio. But before I introduce him, I like to remind everybody, if you are watching this live, please hashtag live. And if you are watching this on replay, hashtag replay. Make sure you tell us where you're coming from so we could acknowledge all of you. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and YouTube. And you could also chime in on Amazon Fire, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or you could simply download the PHLV radio app available on all iOS and Android phones. So today we're going to discuss about one of my favorite cities in the world, Rio de Janeiro. And the last time I went there was 2005. And back in 2005, this is where I bought my jersey in Rio de Janeiro because I am a big soccer, or the international term, football fan. Mainly, I always root for the Brazilian national team. And unfortunately, they weren't able to win this year's World Cup, but in favor of Argentina, which I'm also a fan of. But I don't think I should tell my guest that because he's originally from Brazil. But a little bit about my guest today. As I mentioned earlier, he is the U.S. representative for Visit Rio, the Rio de Janeiro Convention and Visitors Bureau. That's where he got he started his career back in 2014, and he's serving as the Rio North American Media and Trade Relations Representative. Since 2014, he has also worked as Brazil Tourism Public Relations Rep in the United States. And he has over 20 years of experience in marketing and public relations. I like to welcome, and please smash those heart buttons as I welcome Joao Rodrigues to our podcast. I should say ciao, Joao. That actually relevant.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. Happy Tuesday. Very nice to be here.
Now you have over 20 years of experience working. More than 20 years of experience working in travel. And I want to ask you, what do you love about your job, especially marketing Rio de Janeiro, or I would just say Brazil tourism in general?
So obviously it's great to be from a beautiful destination like Brazil and be able to share with the world how beautiful Brazil is. It was always one of my dreams. When I first moved to the States, I always wanted to tell people, I come from this beautiful country, you should check it out. Some people only know Brazil based on what they see on TV, on the news, and there's so much more to it. So I was very fortunate in 2004 to get an opportunity to embark in this journey of promoting Rio de Janeiro as a travel destination. And it was always interesting to meet someone who had never been to Rio and to be able to tell them about all the amazing things, not only the tourist destinations, but the amazing food, the amazing places that people could go to listen to live music. And, again, looking at your jersey, obviously, you could tell them you should go check out a soccer game, a football game at Maracanã Stadium, which is considered the most famous place to watch a soccer game in the world.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I went there, when I went to Rio back in 2005, Maracanã Stadium was under renovation. And so I was really bummed because that was on my bucket list over Ipanema Beach and Copacabana, because I'm a big sports fan. And when you go to Brazil, that's kind of just like a given. You have to watch a soccer or / football game anywhere.
Absolutely.
Because what football or soccer is to Brazilians is equivalent to what basketball means to the Philippines. It's just a lifestyle. That's the nation's sport. Soccer in general is just like outside the United States. That's just everybody's sport. But we'll get into soccer in a little bit. But I do want to ask you, and we are neighbors. You live in New York. You're based in Forest Hills. I'm based in Woodside, and nearby Woodside is Astoria, which is a very heavy populated Brazilian community, and that's kind of how I learned about Brazil. I mean, I've eaten Brazilian food probably as much as I've eaten Italian food and Greek food.
So it's actually funny you mentioned that, because Astoria was actually my first place that I lived when I moved to New York. I moved to Astoria from Brazil in 1990. I went to high school over there, William Cullen Bryan High School.
Oh my God, that's my high school.
Really?
I went to William Cullen Bryan High School, and yes, I have a lot of Brazilian classmates, and I played varsity volleyball, and guess what?
No way.
The best ones.
I played volleyball at Bryan. Not only that, but I actually end up in the book of records for my last year there as the guy who did the most volleyball bumps. Class of '93.
I'm class of 1997, and that's Bryan. I want to say is one has been. I don't know if the tradition still is relevant today, but they've always had a good volleyball. They've always had a good volleyball team, both men and women, and that's a small world. We went to the same high school, but at different
Very, very funny, very small world. But again, it was at Bryan High School that I also not only met a lot of friends that I still have today, but I was also introduced to the concept of the international festival. I don't know if they had them back when you were there, but basically the idea that for me, a boy that had just arrived from Brazil, but all of a sudden he's surrounded by people from all over the world, and then he gets to see an event like that where they show appreciation for all these different places that people come from. I thought it was really an interesting way to learn about different destinations, learn about different places. And I was also very happy that I was eventually able to participate in the international festival and tell people about Brazil, tell people about the carnival, the samba, the football, the food. So that was kind of my introduction to that world of promoting Brazil.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned about that international festival, because that I didn't participate as a participant, but I went as an audience member, and they did have Brazil, and you know what they did there? What the performers, I believe the club members who participated, they did capoeira.
Nice, very nice.
That's actually how I wanted to learn capoeira too, because I thought it's like it combines music and martial arts.
That's right.
And
it's one of those things that people see, especially if you go to Rio de Janeiro these days, you might see people practicing capoeira on the beach. And because of the way it's done, if you're not familiar with it, you think people are practicing a dance or some kind of yoga, especially because of the back movements and everything. So it has an interesting way of, again, also promoting Brazil through this particular sport that, once you see it, you become fascinated by it.
Yeah, and that's just not the only other than capoeira. There's just so many great things about the Brazilian culture, and especially the city of Rio de Janeiro. And I do want to tap in on the you could correct me with the pronunciation, because it's been a while since I studied Brazilian Portuguese, but Cidade Marvelosa. Cidade Marvelosa. I think it's
Cidade Maravilhosa.
Cidade. The chi is Italian. This is the difficulty of knowing too many Romance languages, because I'm combining Spanish and Italian and Portuguese, which are very similar. But it's Cidade. Right. It's Cidade
Maravilhosa.
And that's the translation is marvelous city, which is what Rio de Janeiro is known That's its nickname. So tell us more. Well, New York City is the Big Apple, and Rio is the marvelous city. So what makes Rio a marvelous city in your words?
Well, first of all, the people, the people of Rio are outstanding, and I think that can be easily seen during Carnival, which is coming up. The fact that no matter what happens throughout the year, for that period of Carnival, you see everyone smiling and dancing and laughing and partying. That makes the city so marvelous, and everyone comes together regardless of what might have happened in the past. Everyone is there to celebrate something. Obviously, you have those amazing icons. As you can see in my background, we have Sugarloaf Mountain, Christ the Redeemer. There are things that make the city so unique. You can spot it in any picture and be like, that's Rio de Janeiro. Some people have seen, well, depending on their age, James Bond, the movies that were filmed there. They've seen the Fast and the Furious, most recently Twilight. Rio has that background that really makes people look and be like, wow, it takes my breath away. The beaches, Copacabana, Ipanema Beach makes it such a special place to go and hang out. And there's something very unique about it. And, some people go and if they're Americans, they're like, oh, it has a bit of a LA, California vibe. It has a bit of a Florida, Miami vibe, but it has something that is uniquely Rio de Janeiro there. It's a combination, as I say, of the people, the way that the weather tends to get people like outside of offices and homes. It's another fascinating thing. You go to the beach at any time and it's completely crowded because people want to take advantage of the beautiful beach and the weather. It's funny because if you probably when you went there in 2005, you might have noticed that they actually have gym equipment right on the beach, so people
Yes.
can work out right on the beach. And it's one of the things that a lot of the Cariocas, when they come to the States, they're like, oh man, we had paradise there and we didn't realize because over here we have to work out in a dark room, sometimes in the basement, but over there they get to work out right on the beach, So all of those things together make Rio such a marvelous place. At the end of the year, I don't know if you've ever seen footage of it, but as you can see in my background, we have the fireworks display for New Year's Eve, and the city just lights up. There's usually concerts throughout the beaches. They set up different stages where people can listen to pop music from all over the world, not only Brazilian musicians, and makes it very fun and unique.
Yeah, and when I went back in 2005, I went during August, and Rio, or I should say, I guess Brazil, all year round, the weather is beautiful. I mean, the weather in August, which is their winter, is 80 degrees.
Yes. Yeah, it's a comfortable, cooler version of the summer. Right now, I think a friend of mine just sent me a picture yesterday. It was close to 100, 104 degrees yesterday in Rio.
Oh, wow. That's
So now it's peak summer over there.
Scorching hot, but it is highly recommended by a lot of experienced travelers, and what they write in Frommer's and Lonely Planet, that the best time to go to Rio is around December and March, which is the summer. So
correct.
What do you like about summers in Rio?
Well, I think it's the city comes alive during that time, not only because there are so many different people visiting, it's also when we have our summer vacation. So everyone is off school, and a lot of people tend to take the work vacation towards the end of the year as well. So it's a period when it's just a lot of fun. And again, because of the back-to-back holidays, you have Christmas, end of the year, and then within a couple of weeks we have Carnival. It becomes this period of time that is just fascinating, with a lot of things going on, a lot of buzz, a lot of events. It's great to be in Rio at this time.
And I want to ask you, as a native, and we're going to talk about the two known attractions because I really see it in your screen. Sugarloaf, the Christ Redeemer, and Christ Redeemer is probably the one that everybody knows because it's always pictured in, if you want to fly to American Airlines, they have that statue. When the Olympics were hosted in 2016, of course, they showed Christ the Redeemer. What makes those attractions so special, especially for tourists?
Again, because you can only find them in Rio, that's one. But also their location, I think, because they're both like high up, and from there you can get such an amazing view of the whole city. Personally, I like Sugarloaf a lot more as far as a location and a place to go than Corcovado, where the Christ the Redeemer statue is. Although both are fantastic. The Corcovado thing that is very interesting is that it's actually in a forest. It's one of the largest urban forests in the world is located there. So you can actually go up there either by train or you can actually hike as well up there. But it's an interesting thing to see how religious people, obviously, once they go to that particular place, they feel this connection. People can actually get married over there. I don't know if you know that, but in the base of the statue, there's a little chapel. The whole area itself where the statue is actually managed by the Diocese of Rio de Janeiro, by the church. So if you know anyone who wants to have a very unique wedding, they can have the wedding right there at the foot and the base of the statue. At one point, they were planning to allow people to go inside the statue and hang out right on top where the arm is, one of the arms are, so you can get an even better view, but they decided against that. And on the other hand, at the Sugarloaf Mountain, which there's two different mountains there are actually restaurants and bars and different things going on top there. It's actually an area for events where, especially at this time, again, as I mentioned, because it's summer, they do shows over there between now and Carnival season. There's every weekend there's like a different performance. So even the locals like to go there because of all the different activities that are going on over there.
Now we'll move from the popular attractions to the beaches, which is why a lot of people want to go to Rio. And the famous Brazilian jazz composer Antonio Jobim sings about the girl from Ipanema. And Barry Manilow sang about Copacabana, which were the two beaches that I relaxed and enjoyed the waves. But I will say one of my favorite, between the two, my favorite is Ipanema. It has a more sophisticated, and also probably because of Jobim. I'm a big Jobim fan. But this is what I think for anyone who loves the beach, and I have to say this, and I have to share this story because I remember seeing a sign that says that in the beaches, you have to wear a two-piece. And luckily, I do wear a two-piece. But in the Filipino culture, a two-piece would mean T-shirt and shorts. And that's what my friend, when I went to Rio with my sister and her best friend, her best friend brought the T-shirt and shorts, and we're like, oh no, you can't go to the beach like that. We have to look like locals. So the for anybody who travels to Rio, like please, especially the Filipino community, you have to wear a two-piece. Yes, you have to wear a two-piece, but not T-shirt and shorts.
Correct. Yes. It not only that can be very confusing, but also, as you probably witness, the other thing that can be confusing that the Brazilian bikinis tend to be very small. Yes. However, Brazilians are also very conservative. In other words, they don't allow topless in the beaches. The Europeans always end up having to be warned or told that, hey, you're not allowed to go topless on the beach. You must wear a bikini. But don't worry, the bikinis are small enough, so you'll get a good tan no matter what. But Rio actually has one beach where you can go topless at all. You can go completely nude if you choose that. But most of those other two, Ipanema and Copacabana beaches, you have to wear a two-piece. You're not allowed to go topless. That's basically what the sign means.
Oh, okay. So yes, okay. Just don't go topless, but to our Filipino travel community, please, when you go to Rio, please don't leave the t-shirt and shorts.
That's right. Yeah.
And what I love about I mean, one of going to the beach was my favorite part of going to Rio, and it's not only because like it's beautiful and sophisticated, but it was people watching. I love people playing beach volleyball. I love people these little kids, they were playing soccer in the beach, like in what you mentioned before, like yeah, it's pretty much the gym is the beach.
Correct.
Everybody was out there.
So you will see, as you mentioned, people playing volleyball, people playing football, soccer, people jogging around. Rio also has their own unique sport that combines both volleyball and football. I don't know if you had a chance to see that. We call football. It's basically, it has a volleyball net, but instead of using your hands, they use the leg. Well, they basically can use anything except the hands and the arms. And a lot of people love it. It's amazing to see and watch people playing that. Obviously, there are areas in Rio where people can go surfing. As you may or may not know, Brazilians love to surf, and they actually there are very famous Brazilians in the top ranking of the international surfers, including one that came from Rio, Medina. But absolutely, there are people who go and spend the whole day just sitting there and watching this beautiful show that are other beaches in Rio, just seeing how people interact with each other, all the ways that they, families and people from all over just come down because, the beaches in Rio, they are public. It's even though they might be in front of a five-star hotel, the five-star hotel doesn't own the beach. So people can just come and hang out and spend the day, and doesn't matter where they came from, doesn't matter if they it's a very democratic place because again, everyone is either in the bikini or in the bathing suit. You don't know if they are gazillionaire, you don't know what they do during the week, but everyone is sitting there enjoying the sun, enjoying the same beautiful scenery as you are.
And let's move in from the beaches to sports. And two of the most popular sports are volleyball and soccer. But I'm gonna touch up on like the inspiration behind this jersey. And Brazil is known for its soccer players. Unfortunately, Pelé, the most famous Brazilian soccer player, passed away right before the end of the year. And then the player that I have here, I can't really show it, but I have Ronaldo. And then there's Ronaldinho, and then there's Neymar, and I there's probably a whole bunch of Brazilian superstar soccer players. But I'm wondering, Joao, which is your favorite Brazilian soccer player of all time?
Oh my! No, obviously of all time, it has to be Pelé. Pelé number one. Number two, after Pelé, Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho really exemplified that Brazilian spirit of the jogo bonito, the beautiful game. He used to do things with the ball that, you cannot imagine. And I actually met Ronaldinho by accident at the airport when I was there for the World Cup in 2014. We're both flying from São Paulo to Belo Horizonte to watch the game, and I recognized him, so I had to go up and say hello. Ronaldo, the phenomenon, is high up there, in my list of all-time great players. It's very it's something that every Brazilian feels very proud of to come from a place that it's not only winning 5 World Cups, but having such an amazing list of players every year. Every time that there's a World Cup, there might be a new revelation, a new player who will become, oh my God, that person is even better than the other one, And hopefully hopefully in the next World Cup we'll finally win another championship. But until then, we have the glory of looking back and remembering some of the great players who have won, including those three that I just mentioned. Those would be my top three favorites, with Pelé up there.
And Brazilians are also good with volleyball, both indoor and the beach volleyball.
That's right. Yes.
Do you follow volleyball by any chance?
I'm sorry?
Do you follow any of the of volleyball, like beach or indoor? Because I know it's very popular in Brazil.
It is, and it's. I used to follow more closely when I used to live in Brazil. There used to be, just like we have the NBA over here, in Brazil, they also have the league with teams playing in different states against each other. Unfortunately, I haven't been following that closely. I tend to obviously watch very closely during the Olympics. That for sure, I'm watching to see if Brazil will win another gold medal in the Olympics. But I tend not to follow that closely the domestic games.
Now, there's also a sport that's very popular, and I know you promote it in your tourism, is sport fishing. I mean, that's just in general for the country. So, and you just got back from the Amazon promoting sport fishing.
That's right.
A little bit more about what sport fishing is.
So, the main thing to know is basically the practice of catching and releasing the fish. The main idea is to catch the biggest fish you can, measure it, take pictures. There are different associations that will essentially take the record of the information of how big the fish you caught. And there are people who win awards based on the biggest one that they catch. But at the end of the day, the idea is to catch and release them. And Brazil has some really unique bass. They have one of the most famous ones is the peacock bass. They're very colorful. So I had an opportunity to take a group of journalists up to the Amazon where they were able to fish some incredible species. There's actually one other fish that we end up catching a lot of that we were allowed to not only keep it, but also cook it and eat it, which is the piranhas. Since there are so many of them out there, we tended to, as whenever we had a chance to catch one, because we would essentially go for the same bait as the other fish, we would just keep them, save it for later, and just fry and have a delicious meal of piranhas later.
Now we're going to move, because you mentioned about cooking the fish. Now we're going to go into food. And I do love Brazilian food. And there's more to Brazilian food than, Brazilian barbecue, which is what most Americans and perhaps Filipinos are familiar with. And I know because, Astoria has a lot of Brazilian restaurants. And I've had more than just Brazilian barbecue. And one of my favorite dishes that I've had in Brazil, there's actually three. And I'm going to just mention the first one because it's the national dish of Brazil. It's kind of called feijoada.
That's right.
And
feijoada is one of the...
Tell us what feijoada is. So let's have you explain what feijoada is to our audience, for our listeners.
In extremely simple terms, is a bean stew, but we use all the different parts of the pig when we cook it. The most traditional feijoada might have the tongue, the tail, all different parts of the pig within this delicious stew of made of black beans, and you tend to eat it with farofa, which is this another unique dish that Brazil has that is made of flour. It's something that people usually have it in the weekends, and there is actually a very good restaurant in Ipanema called Casa da Feijoada, which makes some of the most delicious feijoadas that I have ever tasted all around. And it's one of those things that it became a dish as a result of the mix of the different nationalities in Brazil. It was a dish that some of the descendants of Africans in Brazil combined from things that they had seen the Europeans making it. So it just became this unique cultural thing from Brazil.
Yeah, and another, I love feijoada. I haven't had feijoada in a while. Oh no, I'm probably gonna go look in and what would you in New York? Where's the best feijoada that you've ever had? That's close to what you could get in Rio or in Brazil.
The closest, well, there are two places that have some really good feijoada. One is a churrascaria called Plataforma. Even though it is a churrascaria, but you can also get like separate dishes, and they do have the feijoada there. And also on 46th Street, which is Little Brazil in Manhattan, there's a place called Via Brasil, and they also have, I think, on Fridays and Saturdays, like a huge feijoada day that they make like a delicious one, very traditional type. So you should check it out as well.
Another I love also the seafood in Brazil, and one of the best things I've had when I went there was actually I bought it off in the street, which is the camarão, which is shrimp.
Oh, yeah.
And I had it on a stick, and I haven't had anything like that ever since, because the shrimp on the stick, the camarão, they actually cook it. I'm assuming that they cook it in butter and garlic, but they leave the most important the most interesting thing about it is that they leave the shell on, and it's edible.
Yes, that's right. That's
and
the way
and
that they
is
make
that
it there.
part of the street food in Rio?
When you're getting it outside, either in the kiosks or by the vendors on the beach, that's how they traditionally make them. Some restaurants, they tend to remove the shell. There's quite a few different places that have like different ways that they make it. One of my favorite ones is there's a place that makes it inside a pumpkin, which is outstanding. Not even get into how delicious it tastes. But usually some other, like if you're buying it outside, if they are frying it out, they will have the shell left on.
Yeah, and other great Brazilian delicacies aside steak and seafood and feijoada. I mean, there's a whole slew of great Brazilian dishes, but I can't not mention this, but I love pão de queijo. And Brazilian
again, every time I go to Brazil, I end up gaining probably like 5 or 10 pounds, just mostly of pão de queijo. It's one thing for you to have it over here. As you mentioned, you can go to a store, you can go to many different places here in the States and get pão de queijo. Once you're eating it in Brazil, freshly made, and it's usually made from scratch over there. Over here, you get pretty much already made it in a bag, It's such a delicious thing. And yes, I am one of those people that, and whenever I go to a Brazilian restaurant, no matter where, I have to have as a dessert my flan. We call it the pudim, It's just delicious, and it always brings me back to my childhood, because it's like one of those things that you would always have as well as a kid, So
yeah.
It always makes me happy when I hear people say like, "Oh, I love flan from Brazil," and I'm like, "There you go, me too."
And what pão de queijo is to you is what pandesal is to Filipinos too. But pandesal, I mean, it's bread. It's like Spanish bread, and it's there's stuff in it. You can have it with cheese. The in thing now is ube pandesal. It's the purple. If you've seen ube, that's the purple thing that every foodie is raving about.
Ah, I see. Okay.
But
You can go to places in Brazil where they do all kinds of different stuffing for the pão de queijo, including doce de leche, chocolate cream. It's too much, but delicious.
Food could be another topic for another episode topic, because I could just probably go on talking about food with anybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Now we'll move on to food, and we're gonna go into the favelas, and that's kind of just one of the kind of what you see a lot in what I see in Brazilian tours. Aside from going to Sugarloaf and Christ the Redeemer and the beaches, and if anyone have seen the movie City of God. It's focused on the favelas, and the favelas, not to scare anybody, those are the, if you could correct me, Joao, it's the city slums, but it's kind of like, would you compare it to, say, you know, say like maybe Harlem or South Bronx, or in the favelas? I mean, or yeah, explain a little bit what favelas are and what makes it interesting.
You know, it's yeah, as you can imagine, Rio has changed so much over the years. But one thing that was very, I would say, unique is that the people who could afford the best places to live wanted to live closer to the beach, and essentially left the mountains for the poor people to settle over there. You know, you go to California, you go to places that have mountains. Usually, the rich people live in the high mountains. You know, in Malibu or whatever. In Rio, it's the other way around. For whatever reason, a lot of the people who settle in those places and began building homes there, it was because they couldn't afford places closer to the beach, to the flat areas. Um, and yeah, it does have the favelas tend to have that connotation of being like slums. But at the end of the day, they are communities. I wouldn't say that they are like Harlem or the Bronx, but they have got this reputation of being areas that, oh, not everybody can go there because the communities that tend to be not friendly to tourists or not friendly to, you know, people of different social status, you know, if you want to put it that way. But the reality is a lot of the people that work in the hotels, in the restaurants, in the tourist areas in Rio might live in a favela, might come from a favela. You know, a favela these days can be a full-on neighborhood. Some of the most famous favelas in Rio, like Rocinha, have McDonald's, has a Citibank, has all the infrastructure that you would imagine in any other neighborhood in Rio. And there are tours that are promoted by the city, the tourism office, because they tend to focus not so much in the whole, oh, let's do a people safari of this scary place, and more of like, let's learn about a different neighborhood here, you know, and they tend to take people to the favelas to see some of the community centers and to understand how people are getting educated there, and more a bit of a focus on that, as opposed to like, okay, now we're going to drive by an area where, oh, be careful, those scary people are looking at you. Don't, no, that's not, you know, it's, as you said, you know, people could, I have friends who, whenever they come to New York, they tell me, I would love to go see a gospel church on Sunday up in Harlem, but I'm afraid because Harlem is very dangerous. And I'm like, look, similar to the favelas in Rio, you pick and choose where you're going to get off in the subway and how you're going to walk around, and you might end up seeing that places like some of the favelas there are just as gentrified as places in Brooklyn that a few years back you wouldn't go, you know. So I think it's definitely worthwhile for people to check it out and see some of the favela tours that focus on showcasing the best of the communities, because you're also going to learn a lot about the people who put together the carnival in Rio every year, who tend to live in some of those favelas, you know. Essentially the blood, the sweat and tears of Rio tend to come a lot of times from the favelas, you know, and it's great to showcase those people as well. I think I have one example that I always think about it, from all my years working with Rio and traveling there. I remember one time I was actually staying at the Copacabana Palace Hotel, and we were introduced to this young lady who was she was helping pick up the bags from my group, and she was learning English. So she was very happy to say hello to the tourists, to the journalists that I was bringing, and practicing her English with them. And over the years, I saw that young woman go from being the person who picked up the bags to working behind the counter, and helping check in people, to eventually becoming one of the managers at the Copacabana Palace Hotel, and throughout that whole time, she was always proud to say that, at the end of my shift here, I might have to take 2, 3 buses and a moped taxi high up to where I live in the favela, and she's like, it doesn't matter how long I'm gonna work and how much money I make, my home is in the favela. I'm never gonna move out of there, because she was raised there, and she was proud about the fact that there is a community that she went to school there as well, and I think it's important for people to see it's not just a scary side of Rio that you're gonna find in a favela. There's also stories like that, there's a lot of great people living out there in the favelas.
Yeah, anywhere you go, where there's always great stories, great communities. I mean, even in New York too. Like, I remember even going on a hip hop tour, and everyone's saying like, "Oh, you're
Right.
from the South Bronx." I would say that's kind of like a similar comparison. Is like knowing there are good people that come from these communities and who've made it. I mean, obviously hip hop has evolved to one of the most popular music genres. It came in South Bronx too. And speaking of culture, because you had mentioned about Carnival, and February is around the corner. And what's so special about Carnival? And I know what's one of the most popular, what's popular about Brazilian culture is samba.
That's right. That's right. So, Carnival it's a major cultural event, especially for um, uh, countries that tend to be Catholic. It's a time of renewal. It's actually the last chance for them to get out all the craziness that they can before Ash Wednesday, where they tend to make a decision to, okay, I'm gonna withdraw from the drinking party or whatever it might be the case for the next 40 days, And what Rio decided to do almost 75, 80 years ago was to create a major parade, not only to have the people party on the streets, but also have kind of a competition, because there have always been those different parties in different neighborhoods in Rio where people would dress up and create those elaborate costumes, but then they were able to compete against each other and showcase which one had the best, not only samba, not only the music, but the lyrics. And it has evolved to what it is today, which is essentially a major production that could even rival like a Broadway show or a Disney production, because some of those not only the customs, but they have like the cars that have like all kinds of different things going on, like giant eagles and everything else. It's just fascinating. And over the years, they have brought them all to one place, which is the Sambadrome. It's the one place where they always have the parade there for 2-3 days during Carnival. And then they choose which one is the best samba school of Rio in 2023, for example, And similar to soccer, similar to football, there's usually 10 of them in the A team, in the A level, the Premier League, as we would say. The top 2 that don't score as well, they tend to be relegated to one level down, and the school that does well in the level down gets promoted to the next stage, and next year they do it all over again. It's a fascinating show. It brings a lot of jobs to people. It's a major industry. We actually, Rio, a couple of years ago, they created a place called Cidade do Samba, the city of samba, where essentially warehouses where the different samba schools can have places where they can work throughout the year in building those floats. One of the issues was that before they set up this one particular place, a lot of samba schools used to bring the floats from the neighborhoods, some of the favelas up in the hills, and they would break on the way to the Sambadrome. So to kind of help them eliminate that process of like breaking it down, they created this one major place where they can actually work on the floats, and it makes it easier to get to the summer dome. Now that place actually makes it very cool and interesting for tourists to catch a little bit of Carnival throughout the year. Because anytime you want to go there, they actually do tours where you can actually see the preparation of the customs and the floats and everything else. But they actually do like a mini Carnival celebration, I think once or twice a week, so you can get to see a lot of people dress up and dancing and everything else, as you would see during Carnival as well.
And I will say, I love samba. It's one of my favorite music for Brazilian jazz. It's very difficult, and even the dance in itself. I mean, you can watch Dancing with the Stars, and I know a lot of the stars struggled with the samba.
That's right.
But now we have about a couple of more minutes, and I do want to ask you because you could go to Rio at any time of the year. It's always the weather is beautiful. But what do you recommend the best time to go visit the marvelous city?
What I tend to tell my friends, essentially, if they don't care so much for Carnival or for crowds in general, wait until after Carnival. Hotel prices tend to drop a lot, like literally like the week or two right after Carnival. They tend to be a lot cheaper. The weather, as you heard, continues to be. Sorry, I heard some noise behind me. The weather is still fantastic, as you mentioned. But prices and the prices are much lower. The city is not as crowded. So I would say between May and April and October, especially because, as I said, the temperature is getting lower, the place is not so crowded, it's definitely a good time to go there. It's a bit of a low season, but at the same time, the only difference is that you're not going to see as many people there at that time.
And has restrictions changed since COVID? I know you need a visa to get to Brazil. And is there anything else? Oh.
Breaking news!
Breaking news! Actually, all right.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned COVID first because of COVID, the news about the visa waiver kind of people didn't hear much about it because it just came out like in 2019, and then COVID happened, so nobody could travel. But as of late 2019, Americans don't need a visa to go to Brazil anymore. So yes, so no more dealing with the consulate and all of that. You don't need a visa to go to Brazil anymore. Most of the COVID restrictions have been lifted as of, I would say, a couple of months ago. You used to need a negative test or proof that you were vaccinated, but that's no longer the case right now. Obviously, people tend to be cautious, especially now that we are talking about different variants coming up. So, they still recommend for your own safety to wear masks, in certain places. I think a lot of the Brazilian airlines, when you fly, they still require that you wear a mask during the flight. But, I think these days everyone, especially because Brazil has such a high number of people who have been vaccinated, they feel a little bit more safe when it comes to dropping down a lot of those requirements. I think again, the other main thing was the visa requirement, which is no longer in place. So it's a great time to go to Rio. It's a great time to see Brazil.
That's great news because I remember paying $100 for that visa, but that visa lasts like 10 years. And yeah, unfortunately, after 2005, I never had a chance to go visit Brazil because there was just so places I wanted to go to. But that is great news that Americans don't need a visa to go to Brazil. Last question.
And there's also one quick thing to mention. A lot of the airlines like Delta, United, American Airlines, are resuming the direct flights from New York, from Atlanta, from other places to Rio. So as you can imagine, with a lot of airlines flying there, there's a lot of competition, so prices are dropping. So you might be able to find good deals. Even if you want to go for Carnival still, you might still get a good flight down there for a good price.
I'd love to go to Rio during New Year's Eve or New Year's Day and see how the karaoke's ring in the new year. That's a ultimate bucket list travel experience that I would love to experience, other than watching a soccer game at Maracana Stadium.
So there are two things you might actually realize that is very cool about the way the Carioca celebrate the New Year. Traditionally, they all wear white. Everyone wears white. They tend to, obviously, if they are close to the beach, they tend to go to the beach and make an offering for Yamaja, which is the goddess of the sea in the African religion. And besides wearing all white, they tend to accessorize with an item or even a piece of clothing, like a handkerchief or something of a different color. And the different color tends to symbolize something that they're hoping for in the next year. Like, for example, you might see a lot of people wearing a red or pink to symbolize that they want love, or you might see them with a green, which is money, So there are different things that they will wear in conjunction with, like a white, for a woman, a white dress, or for the man, a white shirt and pants, So it's very cool. If you look at the pictures of New Year's Eve on the beach in Rio, you will notice that everyone is wearing white, and it's beautiful.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you, Joao, for everything. We're short of time. I do want to ask you one more thing. How do you say hello? Oh, well, I said say ciao is hello and goodbye in Brazilian Portuguese, but what are some terms that travelers should learn? And I know in Rio they do speak English. It's not hard to. There's no communication barrier from what I remember.
No, absolutely not. A lot of people speak English there, but I think it would be a huge icebreaker as a foreigner if when you see a Brazilian, you say "Oi, tudo bom?" Oi, tudo bom?
Oi.
Oi is hi.
Hi. Okay.
And tudo bom means, is everything all right? How are you? It's very Brazilian for you whenever you come out, say, "Oi, tudo bom?" How's it going? So people tend to say "Olá" as another way of saying, "Olá." And so you see Brazilians say that a lot. And when we say goodbye, we say ciao. Até a próxima. Until next time.
Okay, I'm gonna also on my bucket list, other than Korean, here comes the Portuguese. I promise probably by 2024 or 2025 I'll make it back to Brazil. But thank you, Joao, for coming on. I'd love to have you on in a future podcast where we could discuss more on traveling to other places in Brazil, especially the Amazon.
Great. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'll be happy to come back and tell you more about all these different places that you can see in Brazil.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers, because without your support, this would be impossible. And if you have any questions regarding any travel advice, or if you want to go anywhere, any place in the world, you could hit me up, find me on Facebook. You could find me on My Destiny, DESTENNIE on Instagram, or you could simply reach out to TravelWise International, iTravelWise.com, or simply call a representative to help you with all your travel needs. Smart People Travel Wise airs every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 noon Pacific. I'm Tennie Sumague. See you again next time. Take care.
Just like a friend from back home.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.
CHLV Radio.